Hi everyone, my name is Oliver. I'm a reporter for TAI News. Today I'm going to be interviewing Laura Packard about the debt ceiling negotiation and particularly how that's going to affect the issue of healthcare. Thanks for joining us, and I'm going to add Laura to the feed now. At least I will try to.
Hey.
There you are. Hi, Laura. Nice to finally talk to you. Laura and I have followed
Well,
each other over
we've
the
probably
years
been
on
in the
Twitter,
same
but we've
place at the
never
same
spoken
time
in
before
person.
because we've known each other for like a decade.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It happens. It happens. So, just to start off, can you just let me know your background and how you became involved in sort of the
Well,
healthcare
I
issue
am the
and
executive
what your
director of
advocacy
Healthcare
advocacy
Voter,
group is
but
all about?
healthcare is personal for me because about 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And while I was going through treatments, the MAGA Republicans in the US House were threatening my health insurance, which was keeping me alive. So unfortunately, it feels like we're doing it all over again, where MAGA Republicans in the US House are again threatening the things that we all hold dear.
Yeah, I mean, and so I was curious. The recent bill that was passed in the House, by Republicans on a party line vote, and sort of, they were trying to push the issue of connecting cuts to
Well,
healthcare to the
first
debt
of all,
ceiling,
this
and I was
shouldn't
just
even
curious,
be an
just
issue,
overall, what
and
your
it
take is
wasn't
on.
an issue under former President Trump. It's only under a Democratic president that they feel the need to do something about the debt. So this is an issue that has been made political by the MAGA House Republicans, and they're threatening through this default crisis to wreck our entire economy. Social Security checks, Medicare checks wouldn't go out, veterans wouldn't be able to get their benefits. This is all if they refuse to do their job and take care of the debt ceiling. So in 2 weeks, we're going to face this moment where they could deliberately push us off a cliff to score political points.
Yeah, and speaking of that, like, are you sort of worried about what could be negotiated away during, currently they're negotiating with President Biden about this issue, and are you kind of worried about what concessions could possibly be
Well,
made, both from the White
the MAGA
House and
House
from the House
Republicans
side of things?
passed the Default on America Act a few weeks ago, and the things in that bill are unacceptable. We cannot cut veterans' benefits by 22%. We cannot take food out of the mouths of hungry children. So that's just not okay, and they know that's not going to happen. And so it's a question of whether they come to the table with reasonable options, or they could always just do their job, which they've done several times before, and just pass a clean bill.
Right. And what do you think is the sort of the psychology behind that? Of, that these things are unpopular. Both you and I know that, cutting veterans benefits, that's one of the third rail things in American politics. Like, so why are they even going there in the first place? Because, not only are they unpopular, but these are sort of things that President Biden has been criticizing them over. I cover the White House and Biden, and he's been hammering them over these things
Well,
because,
they've
frankly, they're really
manufactured
easy
this
things to
crisis. It
criticize them
shouldn't
for.
even be a thing, and they're making it a thing. And the reason why they're doing this is because they want to they want to
Yeah.
cut our benefits, and they know they could never do that in a more straightforward way. If we were negotiating on the budget for next year, these cuts would never pass.
Right.
So they are trying to use this threat. They're blackmailing the American people. They're saying, give us the cuts we want, or the American economy gets it.
Right. And it's, sort of a backdoor way of doing this because, as you know, because you've been an advocate for these issues for a long time, like they had complete control of Congress and the White House, President Trump, and they didn't after these programs. I mean, they tried to make cuts to them, not this sort of drastic approach.
Yeah,
They
and
weren't
if
so
you look
concerned
at
about,
what
debt
Republicans
issues and
did
all
when
of
they had
that.
complete control of the government, that's, I think, very telling. And so the one thing they did do was pass gigantic tax cuts for the billionaires and wealthy corporations. So they never figured out how to pay for that. In fact, they figured, not our problem. So now they're trying to figure out how to pay for
Right.
all those tax breaks to billionaires. And how they want to do it is making the rest of us give up the things that we rely on.
Right. I mean, yeah, just today, I think they spoke to, Speaker McCarthy, and they asked him if he would consider rolling back the tax cuts that passed under Trump for, billionaires and millionaires. And he was just like, he immediately responded, no, like that's completely off the table. That's not even on the menu for them. So, yeah, I think that goes to your point of just, what their priorities are. I was curious, what is your major, like your number one top concern as far as healthcare is concerned for what could happen if either,
Well, if we
God forbid, we have to
that is
default
going to
or
have
if something is
immediate
negotiated
effects
away?
because Medicare is something that pretty much every part of our healthcare system relies on. So if Medicare stops paying its bills, hospitals and doctors, medical providers are going to face an immediate crunch. So actually, I've been telling friends and family, if you need to see a doctor, get it done now. Get it done before June 1st, because we honestly don't know what's going to happen. So
Right.
they're going to face an immediate financial crunch when the checks stop coming in. And we're also going to see larger effects in that everyone is going to pay more for their interest rates for their car, their mortgage, their credit card payments. And that's going to have ripple effects throughout the economy because people are going to have less money to spend. And especially if they're relying on their Social Security check in the mail, if they're relying on their veterans benefits to pay their bills, people are not going to be able to pay those bills when those checks stop coming. So that's what happens if we default. And what happens with the drastic cuts they're talking about, they're going squarely after Medicaid, which millions of Americans across the country rely on for their health care. So they say they don't want to cut things, but if you go back to last year's budget levels, that is a cut. And if you put in onerous requirements to keep your health insurance, that's something that people in rural areas are not going to be able to fulfill. And we saw this happen in Arkansas. When Arkansas put in these really strict rules to be able to keep eligibility for health insurance, tens of thousands of Arkansans lost their health care, and they were eligible. They just couldn't get exactly the right form to exactly the right person at exactly the right time every week. So it's just making people jump through more and more hoops. And especially if you don't have good access to Wi-Fi, these things are going to be impossible to do.
Right. Yeah. And that's, right now the Republicans have been talking about these, the work requirements. And I think that, just from covering this issue, sometimes I think that sounds, reasonable to people when they don't understand the underlying problem, like what you presented. That, they sound like, oh, well, someone should be required to be looking for work while they're getting benefits. And I think that's sort of something that the Republicans have relied on, with pushing this issue. And we have, you talk about the MAGA Republicans, Matt Gaetz, who is, ultra MAGA, has been the one pushing this the most, and Speaker McCarthy has followed in his footsteps with that. And so, our little, I would say positive President Biden has sort of, it's clear
Mhm.
exactly what their position is
Well,
going
I
to
think
be,
it's
but it
important to
seems like he's
understand
not really
that
open to the
people
work
on
requirements
Medicaid
issue.
are working. They are working multiple part-time jobs. They are taking care of family members. They are disabled or not in the best of health and not able to work, so they need health insurance in order to be able to work. So it's the majority of people on Medicaid are working families. It's just if you're working 2 or 3 jobs and none of them provide health insurance, and now you have an additional job, which is filling out all of these extra forms and trying to get them to go through at night, and maybe they don't go through, and maybe your Wi-Fi isn't good enough to fill out the form and get the form to be accepted. This is putting an unfair, unrealistic burden on people that are already working really hard.
Right. And I wonder what you thought about, the fact that this is coming up now, and we have to put these things in context sometimes. This is coming after a, 10 plus year campaign to sort of undo a lot of the things that were put in under Obamacare. And, under the Trump administration, that sort of, even though they didn't repeal it, they tried to, stop signups for it. And, I've covered how President Biden has actually put money behind enrolling people in the Obamacare program. So what do you think about the context, the fact that they've sort of lost the big war? Obamacare is here to stay, but they're still sort of and it's unpopular to repeal a lot of the Obamacare legislation, but
Yeah,
this
this
is
is
sort of
this
a
is a
way of
backdoor way to cut
trying
our
to
health
do
care
that, a little
because
bit.
when it's been put on the ballot in red states and blue states and purple states, people vote for health care. People believe that your friends and neighbors should have health care if they need it. So even in places like Oklahoma and Nebraska, they have voted for health care when it's on the ballot. So these MAGA Republicans know that it is an incredibly unpopular opinion to be wanting to strip healthcare away from fellow Americans. And so they do it via the back door. Just like they know the whole laundry list of cuts that was in the Default on America bill are incredibly unpopular if you looked at them one by one. Nobody wants to cut veterans' benefits by 22%. That's a quarter of their budget. So instead, they're using this crisis and playing these political games to get what they could never get if it was if the American people were paying attention and it was done in the full light of sun.
Yeah. And do to that measure, do you think that there are, the motivation to doing this is it that they want to rally their voters? Is it, donors that they want to appease? Is it just, is it just that they're mean guys and gals? Like, what do you think is the actual motivation behind, since these things are so unpopular? Like, why, we look at, cover politicians for a living, and politicians generally like to do things, whether they're good or bad, that get voters excited and activated and out there, and they want to rally for them. Like, I even for a lot of conservatives, like, I don't really think that there's this voter out there that says, like, yeah, you cut veterans benefits, I really want to go vote for you. So
Well, I think it's two things.
what is
I
the
think,
sort of
first of all,
motivation you
they
think is
want to be
behind
able
all of
to
this?
give tax breaks to their donors, to rich people and mega corporations. And second is they truly don't believe that government should play a role in making our lives better. Like this group of MAGA Republicans, for the most part, they really don't think we should have health care. They don't think that we should have a stable retirement with Social Security. They would rather gamble it all on the stock market. They really don't think that we as Americans deserve these benefits that we rely on. So any chance they get to cut these programs, they will take it, even though it hurts their own constituents.
Yeah, and so you sort of, saying in very eloquent terms that, like, this is sort of a moral issue, right? This is an issue of morality on one side of, like, it's just,
Mhm.
they're
Yeah, and I
choosing, in
mean,
your view, an
maybe
immoral
some of the
path
more
to do
moderate
it.
Republicans don't actually believe this, but when you're going along with it, when you are voting on this bill, it doesn't matter if you think the bill is wrong.
Right.
That was your signature on the bill. So it really doesn't matter what they believe in their heart of hearts. It matters how they voted, and they all voted for this.
Right. And so I was also curious, when it comes to sort of practical policy, and, we understand that, like, in an ideal world, like, they just pass a clean bill, but, there are negotiations ongoing. Do you think that there's anything at all, and, feel free to say no, do you think there's anything at all that, like, President Biden would be within, acceptable parameters
Well, I think
of
if they
saying, okay,
want
I'll
to
concede
talk
on this
about
a
the
little
budget
bit?
deficit, they need to look at revenue. They need to look at how we raise money instead of just cut, cut, cut. I don't think they're prepared to do that. It sounds like McCarthy shut that idea down, even though the majority of Americans believe the rich should be paying their fair share, and they aren't. So it doesn't seem like they're willing to consider options for raising money. They only want to cut. And there may be some things that like unspent COVID relief money, there may be some places of agreement, but the plans that they have put forth, the Default on America Act, is not acceptable.
Yeah. And so, I was also curious, like, do you think that, I know this is already having an effect on people, and it's having an effect on them financially, but someone who's gone through this yourself, dealing with a lot of healthcare struggles, and the overall effect on your family, like, how do you feel that just having this hanging over families is affecting people's day-to-day lives? They're, the psychology of, waking up every day and having to, see your possible, your life, under negotiation, as, like, I think sometimes in a lot of the mainstream media, it's covered as this, who's up, who's down, who's winning the fight.
I
But
think that's something
behind
that
all of
people
this, it's,
can't really
real
understand
people
until
in
they go
real
through it.
lives.
But when I was diagnosed with cancer, that was traumatic. But what compounded that trauma was knowing every day that my elected representatives were trying to take away the thing that was keeping me alive. And so, again, veterans have served our country. They potentially put their lives on the line. And now they're looking at just a total betrayal, 22% cuts. And this goes on down the line. Working class families that are struggling to feed their kids, that are working 2 or 3 jobs and don't have health insurance except through Medicaid, how are they going to stay healthy? How are their kids going to get the care that they need? And I think that it is too easy for MAGA Republicans to throw around the idea of cuts without looking at the people face to face who are going to be living through those cuts. Because this bill will change people's lives for the worse. How do you tell your parents that rely on Social Security that the check's going to be cut? If you're a senior in retirement, you don't have a lot of options to make up that difference. So I just feel like they are not listening to the people that they are supposedly representing, because the American people are not on board with these cuts.
Yeah. And speaking to that, what do you, your organization, what do you think that average person can do to sort of, get their friends and family, get people that may not be following, politics as closely as someone like yourself and I are. And, I think sometimes people don't understand that these things are even going on, because they've got lives to live. And as you said earlier, they've got, healthcare issues to deal with. Like, I had a family member that was doing dialysis every other day. Like, they don't have time to be following what Kevin McCarthy and the president are doing day to day, but this is going to affect them regardless. So what do you think that the average, regular
Well, I
person
think
can
it's
do
unfortunate that the
to
mainstream
let
media
their voices be
focuses
heard?
on these issues like it's a game or a race, when it's affecting real people. It will affect real people. It will affect all of us. And I think they should be focusing more on what those effects will be, so people know. But that having been said, social media algorithms are at the moment are not really favoring political talk. So you can put something out there and people may or may not see it. But I think it's important to have these conversations with your friends or family members face to face, perhaps, because again, the media isn't covering this the way that they should be. And the social media platforms, including this one, Instagram, are not favoring that content either. So I think it's on us to make sure that people know in a couple weeks, really serious, bad things could happen unless we take action now.
Yeah, yeah, that was my little dog. So, you know, for the last part, I was curious, where do you think that this is the end game is for all of this? Like you followed this for a long time, and you've seen, positive and negative, outcomes from these stories. And what do you think is going to actually happen? Put on your prediction hat, and what do you think? We know what you think should happen. Is it just a clean bill, and like they've done in the past, and just sort of move along with, stop disrupting people's lives? But what do you think is actually going to happen?
That's a hard
Like,
question,
is the nightmare
because
scenario going to come true?
there are a significant number of people in this MAGA house that are nihilists, that really do not care if they crash the economy and what the effects will be. So that's a problem. And the fact that McCarthy needed those votes to become Speaker in the first place is also a really big problem. So there are various solutions to get around this, like not to get too into the weeds, but there's a mint $1 trillion coin. There's the 14th Amendment where Biden just keeps paying the bills. There's a discharge petition where everybody in the House can vote on it, even if Speaker McCarthy is not in favor. So there's like all of these last-ditch efforts to stop us from going over the cliff. And also they're continuing to negotiate. McCarthy and Biden and the Senate. But honestly, I think that the business community should really step in and start laying down a law to these Republicans, because the business community bought and paid for a lot of these politicians. So it's time to yank the chain and hold them responsible for their bills. I think perhaps the business community doesn't realize yet how close we are to going off the cliff, and that they really need to do something. Like, what's the point of buying a politician if they don't act in your interest? So I don't know what's going to happen. And there is a chance that the worst really does happen, because there might not be enough Republican votes in the House to stop us from going over the cliff. Because as I said earlier, it doesn't matter what's in a moderate Republican's heart if they won't vote for it.
Right. And I think that's an interesting aspect too that you bring up, is that, you think of Republicans, and historically they've been affiliated with, we're the business party, we're pro-business. And I always, with the debt ceiling issue, I think one of the most anti-business ideas is collapsing the U.S. economy and the global economy. Like, why would you even do that if you want to keep business going? And the same thing is, when you look at healthcare,
Exactly.
like disrupting people's healthcare.
Yeah, I may not agree with a lot of these business interests a lot of the time, but it's very clear since Citizens United, they've opened up their wallets and they have bought some of these politicians. So it's astounding to me that they are not taking action when these politicians are driving our economy right off the cliff. Hi, Kyle. I can tell.
Yeah, I know. He's very concerned about the healthcare too. Like, the puppy care included, but he cares about it. Well, Laura, I want to thank you a lot for coming on and speaking to us, and speaking to TAI about this issue. It's really important, and I think I'm glad that you're putting a
yeah, and all
face on
a bunch of groups are getting together
a lot of
keep,
families.
Keep getting the word out. So next week, I believe, Courage for America, Indivisible, Unrig Our Economy, and Move On, among others, are mobilizing to hold Republicans accountable for this, both in districts and in Washington, D.C. They're launching ads, they're holding a lobby day at the Capitol, and they're working with constituents. But if you're listening right now, this is your chance to contact your representative and your senators and make sure that they do something. They need to be hearing from you.
Great. Well, thanks, Laura. I really appreciate it. And we'll continue, of course, cover this story at TAI. We, care deeply about this issue. It affects us and our families. And we want to, elevate people that are concerned about this issue. It's not just, up and down, political gamesmanship.
Thank you.
These are real people's lives behind it. So thanks a lot, Laura. I appreciate it. Bye.